Hello, everyone. Just making sure that we're up and running. Seems to be. I see we have a couple of people from Florida here. I hope you're well and avoided the worst of those storms. It looks pretty bad what I've seen. So we'll get started. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. Okay, everyone. So today we're dealing with the fetter of ill will. We've done the three lower fetters that apply to stream entry, and last time we introduced the first of the middle fetters, sensual desire, and today we're doing vyapada or ill will. Those two, sensual desire and ill will, are attenuated greatly at the stage of Sakadagami or once returner, and only fully eliminated by the Anagami or once returner, which, as we'll be discussing next week, that remains yet for the Anagami the five so-called higher fetters. Ill will, vyapada, is in many ways you could think of it as the negative or flip side of sensual desire. Just as sensual desire is the urge in the mind for the experience of pleasant sense experiences, ill will could be considered as the desire to avoid unpleasant sense experiences. Now, vyapada as a term is broad. It generally covers all that whole spectrum of negative mind states, from mild irritation to anger and hatred, the whole spectrum of negativity. One feature of ill will as defilement is that it's unpleasant immediately upon its arising, whereas sensual desire can be seductive and can seem pleasant. Ill will is experienced as painful or suffering immediately upon arising. So it's particularly foolish in a way to succumb to ill will. Ill will has many manifestations, as I mentioned, and one of the common ones is anger, and this can be difficult to deal with in the mind when anger arises. A simple mental gymnastic to avoid anger is, when anger arises, to identify it clearly as anger is arising. Don't identify it as I am angry, and never identify yourself as an angry person. There's just anger is arising. So depersonalize it right from the outset. That's actually a simple little trick that works very well for many people. anger is never useful. It's never justified. At one time, I heard on a radio program had a discussion of different religious leaders talking. It was basically Christian themed. They were talking about the 7 deadly sins, which is a Christian list of defilements, and one of them is anger. And they had different speakers talking about anger, and most of them were Christians. They also had Jewish and Muslim, and they had the one Buddhist. They had the Dalai Lama, and everyone else found some reason to excuse anger against injustice, or anger against evil doing, whatever, is justified. Whereas the Dalai Lama started out right away: anger is a poison. There is never any justification for anger. It always causes suffering. So he was the only one who took that position. And as a matter of fact, anger in all cases makes you less effective. There are in this world, this samsara is, as we all know, it's imperfect, and there are incidents of cruelty and ill will and injustice coming from outside, and sometimes we have to deal with them. But if you are angry, then you'll be less effective in counteracting these forces. I once had a conversation with a woman who was skilled in martial arts. She had a black belt in karate, and she was telling me about how when they have a contest, they have a bout. She says that one thing she doesn't like is some of the contestants, they play dirty tricks and try to play mind games to psych you out. And I asked her to explain that, and she said, well, they do things to try and push your buttons and make you angry, because then if you're angry, you're going to make mistakes. And I thought that was really interesting, that even in an activity that's basically a warrior contest, anger makes you less effective. So there's really no situation where anger is helpful. A calm, equanimous mind is always going to deal with any situation better than one that's fired up with the passion of anger. Other kinds of ill will are basically on the spectrum of just negativity, ranging from mild irritation to burning hatred, and everything in between. And I think most of us would be able to spot that the more obvious, heavier manifestations of ill will when they arise, but often in meditation, it's the mild forms of ill will that'll act as a hindrance. Besides being a fetter, Samyojana, Vyapada, or ill will, is also listed amongst the Nivarana, the hindrances, which are blocks to samadhi. And as long as there are any of the 5 hindrances in the mind, that the mind cannot deepen the samadhi into jhana. And ill will can manifest in subtle forms as irritation. It's too cold in this room, or it's too hot, or there's a fly buzzing, or my leg is starting to hurt. All these sorts of minor annoyances that can arise in the mind, which, as I say, is akin to a negative form of sense desire. experiencing certain sense impressions that are unpleasant, and you react to them with that ill will. You could say that both desire and ill will amount to a lack of contentment with the present content of consciousness. You're not at peace. You want something more or you want something less, but you're somehow not at peace with what is. And when ill will becomes a problem in the mind, the standard cure is to practice metta. Metta meditation, loving kindness meditation, is useful for everyone, but for people who are having a problem with ill will or anger, it's highly advised that they take it up and practice it seriously. Now, I've found in my experience that the people who need metta the most, the people who have a tendency towards anger or negativity, have a resistance to doing metta. People who are already of a kindly, benevolent disposition, they love doing metta. They don't need it as much, but it certainly doesn't hurt. It's beneficial for everyone, but the people who really need it, they tend to have a resistance to it. So if you fall into that category, you should examine yourself and get over your resistance and do some metta. It will help to calm out the anger and the ill will. As we said last week, the once returner, the Sakadagami, is the second stage of enlightenment. And a person who has attained to Sakadagami is only reborn into human form one more time at the most. And at that stage, the person has attenuated, but not eliminated, sensual desire and ill will. So what that means is a little hard of definition. But we could say that these factors it's no longer possible for them to obsess the mind and cause the person to act in a unwholesome way. They might arise in the mind, but they won't grip or obsess the mind. And this is different than in the case of the stream winner, where the first three fetters are utterly eliminated. So any sign of them arising in the mind is a sign that the person is not yet a stream winner. But it's a bit harder to diagnose for certain Sakadagami. So I think that's sufficient introduction, and I'll look now at the chat and see the questions. There's one here from Norma from South Florida. She asks, "Is it okay?" She has the refuge and precepts, but interrupted in weak meditation. Can I still make progress on the path? I'm 72 and 8 years practicing. Yeah, you certainly can make progress. You've got the foundations. Just steady as it goes. Just keep at it. You're certainly not a hopeless case. Ryan, would it seem logical and effective to obtain first jhana first and eliminate torpor, then proceed to sotapanna and continue on with other jhanas? Well, there's no one program that's universal, but if we look at the suttas, the Buddha talks about different practice paths, but the one that he seemed to talk about the most was going through the four jhanas and then proceeding to investigation or insight and uh, obtaining stream entry after after the jhanas. Another path is exactly what you mentioned, going as far as first jhana and then switching to insight. He also mentions, at least in one or two places, bare insight without prior development of jhana. But he dealt with that so little, I think it was not a favored approach. Will anger help with running and lifting weights? No, it won't. You're going to upset your physiology if anger's arisen. So you're going to be less able to methodically do a weight training program or running. And when you're angry, it has besides a mental effect, it also has an effect on the body that's harmful. How much doubt is skeptical doubt? How much doubt can a typical secular person of the West have healthy if they're just coming into Buddhism? Yeah, that is an excellent question. And I talked about that a bit a couple of weeks ago when we did Wicikitcha, which is translated skeptical doubt, although I prefer to translate it as uncertainty. The problem is, translating it as skeptical doubt, the problem is that doubt in itself can have a positive side to it, in the sense of having an open mind, not being dogmatic. That's not spiritually helpful either, to have a dogmatic fixed view. But the skeptical doubt or Wicikitcha is the mind that it's not open. It craves certainty, so it vacillates between option A and option B, and it feels determined that there must be a correct answer, and really wants to have it, but is uncertain as to what it is. Whereas the mind with the healthy kind of doubt is open mind, saying, "Well, I don't know. I'll find out." So we could call someone with an open mind someone with doubt, but it's not the same thing at all. The next one, Bante, if we have good sila but see corrupt thoughts and memories continuously coming up during meditation, what practice should be undertaken in order to purify the mind? Well, there's different approaches that one could take. The Vipassana approach is to recognize and see these thoughts and memories when they come up, dispassionately. Like if you were watching a movie, just see it and recognize it, but don't take ownership of it. This is a thought or a memory, and it's an object of consciousness. and try and break it up in the sense of seeing it in a more fine grain, in an almost kind of atomic level, like the components. See and notice any emotional state that arises as well as an object, and cut through it that way. That can be difficult if one has these, persistent kind of thoughts or memories. Sometimes a painful memory can just keep coming back again and again. And then you might want to take a more samadhi approach and develop, for example, loving kindness, or if there are thoughts of sensual desire, develop 32 parts of the body. Take up these meditations that are counteractive to the defilement. Could Ajahn explain more on plants having one faculty? I don't see anywhere in Sutta Vinaya says that. My understanding, they are just rupa udaya, rupa reaction with each other. No, it's not from Sutta or Vinaya. It's from Abhidhamma. It's the definition of plants in Abhidhamma in the section on faculties. I think in the Dhamma Sangani, I'm not sure, but you find it in the Visuddhimagga that plants have, or animals and humans have life faculty and consciousness faculty. There's altogether, I think, 22 faculties, but the critical ones here are life and consciousness. And plants have life, but they don't have consciousness. This according to Abhidhamma. So that means that they have a vitalism, they have a biology, they're organic, but they're not sentient. They don't have any consciousness, and they don't make any karma. If I know Nichidukkha Anatta, I understood Dhamma and the world. Yes, actually, you will. If you penetrate any one of them to perfection, that will open up as a gateway to liberation. And it's working on understanding and penetrating the nature of the three characteristics is really the key to attaining awakening. When keeping 8 precepts, is there a way for a beginner to ease into having 1 meal a day? How to bear with hunger and still function throughout the day? It's not really that hard. A lot of the hunger that arises is purely mental. It's the desire mind rising up. Now, the Buddha did allow you're still keeping the 8 precepts if you take the 5 tonics in the afternoon. Because when the Buddha first laid down the rule for the monks not to eat in the afternoons, some monks most of the monks were able to deal with it easily, but there were some monks who felt weak and sick in the afternoon. Probably they had blood sugar issues, but the medicine at the time wouldn't understand that. So the Buddha says, I allow the 5 tonics. The 5 tonics are sugar, honey, oil, ghee, and something called nawanitang, which is controversial. The Pali is nawanitang, and it's some kind of a dairy product. In Thailand, where I was trained, they take it to mean cheese. In Burma, they take it to be butter. Someone who studied the occurrences of nawanitang in the texts thinks it's like it was probably some kind of a cheese, but more like a cottage cheese, like a semi-liquid cheese. You can also have fruit juice in the afternoon, as long as there's no pulp in it, just clear fruit juice. But basically, the thing is to, when hunger arises, to just recognize it as a mental state, and it gives you. It's one of the advantages of taking the 8 precepts is you can see these states arise, and you don't avoid them by immediately appeasing them. So you learn about them. There's also one more thing I could say about it is the rule. It's not the rule isn't strictly one meal a day. The rule is only eating between dawn and noon. That's dawn, the sun rising and solar noon. Um, so in many places they'll have 2 meals in that time. They'll have a light breakfast shortly after dawn, and then the main meal shortly before noon. And that's allowable. What are the ideal conditions for obtaining first jhana, and what are the best for this, please? Um, well, the first thing is a foundation in sila, keeping the 5 precepts. Without a foundation in sila, you won't get very far with jhana work. Um, uh, the next thing is to pay attention to the 5 nivarna, the 5 hindrances, and when you see them arising in the mind, dismiss them or deal with them. Don't succumb to them. So this is what keeps us from jhana. Jhana is not that hard, if really, in the sense that it's a very natural state of mind. People tend to think of it as something very esoteric. It's a very natural state of mind. It's the mind. It's really the mind's natural state when the hindrances are not present. So if you're having trouble deepening your samadhi, figure out which hindrance is causing the problem and deal with it. Maitreya Buddha mean Metta Buddha, Ajahn. Yeah, I think that's the origin of the name. In Pali, we call him Maitreya. In Sanskrit is Maitreya, and it comes from it's the same root as metta, and there's a tradition that he will particularly be a Buddha of compassion or of loving kindness. Any motivation for meditating more? I try to, but end up stopping early. The best thing is to develop consistency of practice. It's the most important thing about a daily practice. Is you set aside a certain time of day. It doesn't matter whether it's morning or evening, whatever works for you. Set aside a time of day and make sure you do it every day at that time. And set a timer and decide, I'm going to meditate for, if you're a beginner, like half an hour, but try to work it up to an hour. And even if the mind is totally lost, you have some benefit from just developing your baramis by just sitting there and finish out the time. And it may be difficult at first, but if you're consistent and do it every day, whether you feel like it or not, it becomes a habit. And this habit formation in the mind is very powerful. It can be used for good as well as bad. You can develop good habits by simple repetition. I can remember what the word in Pali for bare insight that the Buddha talked about without jhana. Trying to remember. I don't think it was Vipassana. I don't think he uses Vipassana in the sutras at all, or maybe only once or twice. But I think it's maybe something like Sukha Panya, bare wisdom. I'm not real sure. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember. Is it okay to ask more personal questions? If so, I would like to ask if you were happy as a monk. Yes, I'm quite happy. Why are memories typically lost upon really so memories are lost in the confusion of the process? It's actually not all that rare for very young children to have some traces of memory of past lives that fades as they grow up a bit and start to engage in the world more. Then the past life memories fade away like dreams. Like when you have a dream at night, I'm sure you know the experience of waking up and you have bits and pieces of a dream in your mind, but it fades completely and you lose it. I think this is what happens. Our past lives become like dreams. We are the dead. How can we help the dead? This thought helps bring me to this moment of peace. Okay. Yeah, we are the dead walking, dead man walking. How can we establish a strong foundation of right view and gain Yonaso Manasikara? Um, a good way to develop right view is study. Learn the Dhamma, listen to Dhamma talks, read the suttas, gain gain a theoretical knowledge. And Yonaso Manasikara comes from that. You train the mind to see things in terms of Dhamma. When practicing metta, I wish for difficult people to find the true cause for happiness. I do not force liking a person. Is this correct practice? Yes, that's exactly right. Uh, don't confuse. This is something I think some people do. They confuse metta with liking a person. It's not. It doesn't mean you have uh, any affection or desire to be close to a person. If you have metta, you're just wishing them well. May they be happy. May good things come for them. Um, there's a parita chant. It's a protective verse that we used to do in the jungle uh, as a protection against snakes and scorpions and so on. And the translation of the chant in part is, I wish metta, I wish all good things for snakes and scorpions and centipedes and spiders. There's a whole long list like that. And then it says, may you be well and happy, but may you stay far away from me. I want to visit a monastery close to me, but looking at their online presence, I get the impression they're more like cultural centers for their respective diaspora. How do I know if a monastery is open to foreigners? Yeah, many of the city monasteries in Western countries are very aligned to serving their own ethnic community, whether it's Sri Lankan or Thai or what have you. But my experience, they're mostly also open to anybody coming for a visit. You may or may not get too much out of it because you may not really find anyone who speaks English or the local language. But it's possible you will. And I know some monasteries that like that, like what you say, that are set up to serve their diaspora. They also make an effort at outreach, and they sometimes will have Dhamma classes that in English. So the only way you can really know is to just go and pay the visit. At the very least, they'll be courteous and they'll let you, especially if you know a bit about the tradition, and you come in and bow to the Buddha Rupa, bow to the senior monk. Then you've already established yourself as being in the tradition. Okay. Why is popular culture using Buddha images in inappropriate ways? Yes, I know that bothers me too. I see that sometimes. But it's just it's ignorance. I don't think there's any malice behind it. They just really don't know what they're doing. Will you be visiting the UK anytime in the future? Thanks. I don't have any plans to. I have been to the UK before a couple of times and visited our monasteries. I went there for a sangha gathering a few years ago, but I don't have any plans upcoming. Have you ever looked into Orthodox Christianity and its monasticism? And if so, what do you think of it? Yes, I'm intrigued by the Orthodox Christian tradition. I have visited an Orthodox monastery just on like a day visit and talked to some of the monks. Um, and there's a lot, although I want my experience, and also with the Western monks too, Western Christian, Catholic Christian. My experience is that the metaphysics is quite different, but the lifestyle is not that different, and the practice of the experience is got a lot of overlap. And I think Orthodox Christianity even more so. The concept in the Orthodox Christianity of God as apophatic, meaning cannot be expressed, cannot be described, is different than the Latin Christian view of God, uh, with Thomas Aquinas, uh, his theology of various attributes of God. The Orthodox think that's kind of presumptuous, that God is beyond any logical discussion. So, in some ways, that's similar to the way we think of Nibbana. Have you ever got involved with ghosts, devas, or nagas? No, not directly. Is it true the Buddha didn't want paintings or sculptures made in his likeness? Um, well, he never, to my knowledge, he never expressly said anything about that. But it was the early tradition in Buddhist India, that they didn't represent the Buddha. I think it was a natural respect that they're not going to reduce the Buddha to an image. And you'll see early Buddhist art. They'll show like carvings, wall carvings will show scenes from the Buddha's life, and the other characters are shown in full. But where the Buddha is, all you'll see is footprints on the ground, or a umbrella overhead to indicate, here's the Buddha, but we're not showing him. It was only after the Greek colonies in what's now Afghanistan took up Buddhism that they began making images of the Buddha. So the first images of the Buddha were made by Greek artists. I used my spine as an object of meditation today. It was very engaging, had my attention for a long time. For me, a healing flavor. I have chronic condition, etc. Is that right intention? Yeah, that's good. It's actually one of the 40 meditations in the Visuddhimagga is 32 parts of the body, and the traditional way of doing that is to go through the 32 parts and then focus on one part. In your case, that'd be bone, right? You took the spine. Yeah, that's a valid meditation, and it could have a healing effect by tuning your psyche to the physical form. Are there Arhan Brahmas and Sudavasa when a Brahma becomes enlightened or the extinguished? There is I don't think that they're in Sudavasa, but there are, because well, it could be. I don't recall any mention of that, but there are mention of uh, Arahant Brahmas, of the first level Brahmas. Um, they're called Brahmas without asawas. So there are occasionally Brahmas who become enlightened and continue in existence for some time. A rabbi I was listening to said technology would exponentially increase after the birth of the Messiah. Does the Buddha have a take on technology or Messiah? Um, I was thinking that's, in a way, is two separate questions. I don't really link. I guess the closest thing to a Messiah in Buddhism would be the coming Buddha, Metta Buddha, and it's not. It's not. There's no mention I recall of any um, increase of technology at the time. Although there's a passage in Sutta in the Digha Nikaya talking about the world at the time of the arising of Metta Buddha, and it's supposed to be. It could be interpreted, I suppose, as a technological civilization, because it's talking about Jampadipa, or India, being so full of people it'll be like one big city, uh, and people will live. You'll be very crowded together, but they'll be very happy and prosperous and peaceful. I know monks aren't allowed to declare attainment, but other arhats alive today. Um, you're quite right. They won't declare their attainment generally, although I think Ajahn Mahabua pretty much did before his death. I think, I like to think that there are still arhat monks, and in Thailand you hear certain senior, very venerable monks will have that reputation, but you never know for certain. What does a halo depicted in Art of the Buddha represent? Um, yeah, that's a intriguing motif in art, because we see that in Buddhist art and in Christian art too. That the enlightened or holy beings will have the halo around their head. I think it. I'm speculating to some degree, but I think it's a visual representation of their aura, their spiritual energy. I think there is a monk I met who could read minds. Is that true? It could be. That's one of the psychic powers. Uh, and that, again, mentioning Ajahn Mahabua, he had that reputation that he could read minds, and I've heard stories that of monks who stayed with him that seem to confirm that. He would know, like he would. There's a story about him when uh, he would have the monks who he would giving a little bit of a talk to the monks, and he would start criticizing somebody had done something wrong, and there's no way he could have known about it, and he'd start, without naming the person, he'd talk about the details of the incident, and this shameless monk here that did this and that. Mhm. How to deal with ill will towards meditation session? Uh, yeah, try and you have to get over that. Is try and develop a more peaceful and pleasant meditation. Uh, Try to be more relaxed in your meditation. It shouldn't, if you're meditating well, it shouldn't feel like a chore. It shouldn't feel difficult. Okay, let's just see. How to deal with ill will when there are prejudiced people around? Um, I don't think it's helpful to confront them with the hostility, but if you can develop a skill of undermining their views in a gentle, kind way, that's the best. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up uh, for this time, and next time we're going to deal with Rupa Raga, the desire for existence of form, which is one of the higher fetters. Okay, goodbye all.